Okay, make sure my camera is. Okay, so we're gonna do a back bending practice today. I have my space heater going, my furnace isn't working, so we have direct heat here. Hopefully you can't hear it, it's not that loud, but I'll try to project my voice a little bit more. So let's just come into a seated position. It's the 15th, so go into your less preferred or less habitual seated position and just spend a little time making those adjustments so you feel really perched directly over the centers of the sitting bones. You feel balanced between the two sitting bones. Rolling your shoulders back. Inviting a lift and a spread to your chest that doesn't push the abdomen forward. Keeping the skull above the spine. And then join the hands and bring them right in front of the chest, letting your eyes softly close and looking away from the brain. Trying to find a sense of surrender in your legs. And sometimes support is required to help you feel that. Try to relax into the groins and the hips. Imagine the knees starting to descend toward the floor. Feel a rooting down of the sitting bones. Feel a gentle release of the shoulders, shoulder blades. Treating the lower jaw as part of your grounded body, just unhinging the lower jaw. If you're not sure how to achieve that, sometimes just lifting the corners of the mouth or swallowing once. Imagining a little more space inside of your mouth. And start to find a lateral spreading of the rib cage with every in-breath. Softening of the abdomen. Attempting here to align the mind, presence with where the body is, with what you're doing. And an exhalation bowing toward your heart. Let your hands release down to your thighs, and on an in-breath, lift your head. Let your eyes gently come open. Welcome. So we're going to talk about the kind of the vulnerable nature of the back bends because we're exposing the soft organs, the heart. We kind of default close in these areas, so we're going to open them up, but using lots of support. And the effect is really exhilarating, uplifting, kind of brings a sense of confidence, and hopefully we achieve that by the end of the practice. We're going to start with modified Paryankasana. So this is where we take a kind of a recline over two blocks. And we're going to start in cross-legged position, and then we will work toward bounding position. So you'll want to set up two blocks, and you can really play with the height of the blocks. You might be ready to come up high. You might need to start on a low or medium setting to your block. Might not know yet. You probably don't know yet. So just kind of guess. So the block that's going to go behind the chest is kind of what you need to figure out what the body is ready for. We'll start with our dominant cross-legged position. So whatever you were just doing, you'll switch. And then I like to use my thumbs to kind of hold the block so that it doesn't rock over, tip over, doesn't shift. And then I'm going to come down and try to land the area just directly behind the sternum to that elevation, to that block. And then you have to place the head block to whatever level you need. so that your head isn't dunking down toward the floor. It's pretty much level, chin and forehead are level. And then you'll start with a arms unfolded, kind of like a Shavasana arm position. And make sure if your legs are kind of gripping or holding themselves up here that you tuck something under your hips or your knees so that you have support. So the full version of this pose is actually done from the reclining hero pose, which we will get to later in this class. But just feeling the support behind the breastbone to keep your chest lifted and spread. Feel how the shoulders naturally descend toward the floor. You can keep your eyes pointing toward your cheeks. Make sure your chin is angled toward the chest, not away from it. And after a few more breaths, we'll just change the crossing of the legs. So just really try to tap into the same heavy femur bones, descending knees, softened groin, softened hips. And you shouldn't have to be very effortful here. The props are really there to create the support that you need so that the body can just kind of drape over the support and open in a more passive way. Without disturbing the chest, see if you can change the crossing of the legs. This is a back bend, so if your lumbar spine feels shortening or hyper extended, just remember to take the tailbone gently toward the ceiling to tilt the pelvis back, to elongate the lumbar spine. We will join the feet now for the bound angle version of this pose. So just taking the soles of the feet together, the outer edges of the feet together, releasing or relaxing the inner edges of the feet away from each other so that the feet kind of look like an open book. Again, make sure you have the support you need. If the legs are holding themselves up, tuck something under the hips or knees or thighs. Lengthening from the roots of the upper inner thighs all the way out through the inner knees and even beyond. Still feeling the descent of the thigh bones. And now just using your fingertips, help the knees find each other, come back together. And then wiggle the feet out nice and wide. You can come up directly if you can really anchor into your forearms, otherwise roll to the side. But just remember, you're on a lot of height, so be careful either way that you come up, and do so with your core kind of tightened. We're going to set up for Virasana, so the hero pose. So this is a pose that we really have to know. I call it the Goldilocks effect. We have to know what props we need to make it not only sustainable, but actually enjoyable, because you don't want to be kind of white knuckling your poses. So first of all, make sure you have something padding underneath your shins, toes, knees. Your mat might be enough, but you also might need the additional blanket underneath. Another way we can kind of soften if you have knee discomfort here is to sandwich a thinly folded blanket all the way to the backs of your knees. This can bring a lot of relief for some people to this pose. The nice thing about that blanket, if you do use it, is it can hammock under the sitting bones and create the support you need so you don't have to use the additional block. But if you're not going to use the sandwich blanket, take something under the sitting bones if your sitting bones are just suspended in space, because we definitely want them sitting down. And then you're going to refine the pose once you have sitting bone support, your knees are comfortable. Just look at the four corners of the knees, and if you see any distortions, any tilting, you're going to try to work with the flesh of your legs, rolling the calf muscles out. You might additionally roll the under thigh in. You want to make sure your toes are directly behind the heels. And then bring your hands, your fingertips to the soles of the feet and put the shoulders right above the hips. Try to really create evenness. Sometimes here we push the abdomen forward. So navel in, tailbone forward, skull adjusts right above the spine, external shoulder rotation. So you might even turn, touching down on the toes, you might even turn so your palms face forward. That can help you really rotate the shoulders back. And you might close the eyes. Sometimes closing the eyes can help us sense our way into our poses rather than seeing a shape or letting the eyes drag us around. Sometimes I find that it's helpful to put my head in alignment when I close the eyes. I don't have that pulling forward tendency that the open eyes might bring out. And you're just softening into this deep, deep stretch in your legs. So it's, for some of us, it's really about the thighs. You're going to feel your thighs quite a bit. For some of us, it's the ankles. For some of us, the knees are really getting a chance to stretch here. And this is, by the way, a very healthy pose for your knees if you do it correctly. So it's not a pose to avoid around knee issues. It's just a pose you want to be very careful and attentive to around knee issues. Maybe envisioning the outer shins rolling down toward the floor. We're just going to stay a few more breaths here, but this time we're going to open eyes and bind the hands. Push the palms forward, Parvatasana, and take the arms up. This pose has two names, Badangulyasana and Parvatasana. And the names are different whether you're in hero pose or standing. So in hero pose, it's Parvatasana. Press up through the palms, straighten the arms. Take the hands any amount back. Plug the shoulders into the torso. Don't let your head fly forward. Keep your eyes softly rooted to the back of the head. Open the armpits and treat the arms like extensions or lifters of the sides of the trunk. Use the arms to lift those lats up to create space between the side ribs to really grow the extension of the trunk. We're going to just change out the interlocking fingers. So bring the hands forward and just switch to the alternate loose pinky. Go tight into the finger webbing and then again press palms forward and take arms up. And sometimes we think we know what's going on without the use of the vision, but it's always good to kind of check. So look up at the hands and try to really see if you have evenness. A lot of times we're a little bit low or dull on the thumb side of the hand. So reaching up with a little additional effort there. Just a few more breaths. Keep anchoring into your legs, your shins, your sitting bones. Wonderful. Release your arms. And we'll give the legs a nice break in downward facing dog. So you can start to transition and just kind of move things aside. When you're ready, turning the toes underneath and exhale, extend the legs. And don't worry about your legs straightening just yet. Just pull the hips as far back as you can, away from the wrists. You might start to open the knees a little bit wider, but keep your heels really high. Find full extension of your legs if you're able to. And then the last piece is to work the heels down. So that's the very last piece, and sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes we have a beautiful very alive pose without forcing the heels down. Imagine you're holding pencils in your hip creases, so keep tipping the pelvis forward and keep sinking the shoulder blades in toward the chest. Press the leg bones back. Move your chest toward your thighs, and 3 more breaths. And go ahead and place the knees. We're going to take child's pose. So just step the knees out wide so that you have enough room for your chest to come down nice and low. Feet together. Your hips as far back as they can go, as close to your heels as you can bring them. And then we're going to slowly come up out of child's pose. So we're going to set up for reclining hero pose now. So just like you set up earlier for your seated hero, except you'll need whatever props you'll need for support so that you can take your torso back and rest on something. So I usually use a bolster and a couple of blocks. This pose has always been very challenging for me. Some people can recline back directly onto the floor, which I've always been amazed at. And if that's you, then you don't need a whole big setup. But for a lot of us, we need to have the support kind of built up to meet the torso. So I use this kind of inclined bolster setup. And if you don't have these things at home, you will just be reclining back, but using your fingertips or your forearms to hold you there. So it won't be as restful, but you'll still get a chance to deepen the pose by angling back. You still want to have your sitting bones supported. Sometimes for those of us that have more of a hyperextensive lumbar spine, it's also helpful to have a little bit of a blanket where the lumbar spine will be. And again, just like the seated hero pose, this pose is really, really great once you have the support that you need. And it's really beneficial. It's actually a pose a lot of teachers teach every single time they teach a class, because it's seen as one of the essential or fundamental poses. So you'll just kind of come back and see about if your supports are right, and they change. What you need will change from day to day. So I'm now realizing I'm going to take more support. So I'm going to stack 2 additional blankets on my bolster. You have to remember that the body will not let go of deep-seated tension until it has the support it needs. So there's really no other way around it but to give your body the support that it needs. So what we don't want to have happen when we recline back is the knees flying up or separating or doing both. So really drive your knees down. Keep the knees together. Start with your hands on your feet, just kind of pressing down there to keep the shoulders working toward the floor. Tilt the chin toward the chest. And if you feel that big kind of sway back, arching in the lower back, then really work with the pelvic tilt. Take the tailbone into the soft tissue of the body, up toward the ceiling. See if you can kind of flatten that lumbar curve a little bit more. And then you're going to kind of sense your way into if and when it feels right to extend your arms. And again, treat the arms like extensions of your torso. So raising the arms in alignment next to the ears. Gravity will help you kind of bring the arms back
Reach out through the fingernails. Keep your eyes pointed toward your cheeks so that you're not, there's a tendency to get all excited in these kind of back bends or upper body effortful poses. So really kind of temper that with a downward gaze, your chin tilted toward the chest. And we're just going to stay another minute. If you need to leave early or adjust, make sure to listen to your body. If your arms are extended, try to fully extend them, meaning they're not soft at the elbows. You're really straightening the elbows. About halfway through that minute, so just about 5 more breaths. If you did extend the arms, start to move your hands back toward your feet. And as you exit, don't do it yet, but remember you want to keep your sternum forward and you want to really tighten or corset the stomach muscles around the spine to really support your spine, your back coming up. You press down on the floor, lead with your sternum, find your way up. And then sit forward enough that you can remove the props from your mat. And then you're going to sit into a table pose for a moment. Cross at the ankles and sit back. We're going to come into Dandasana. So most of us will benefit from a little bit of height under the sitting bones in Dandasana, the staff pose. So take a blanket and just kind of wedge it underneath your sitting bones and then extend your legs. And that should feel really welcomed after the hero pose to really open the backs of the knees. If you have muscular or fleshier legs, just kind of run your hands down the back of each leg to help the legs sit down a little bit closer to the floor to close that gapping behind the knees and ankles. And then just prop your fingertips next to your hips. Squeeze the elbows in a little bit. Move the shoulder blades toward the chest and look straight ahead onto your horizon line. And just anchor into your legs as best you can, rolling the inner knees down, compacting the legs toward the floor, reaching out through the heels, the inner and outer heel, reaching out through big toe and small toe ball mounds, and reaching out through all 10 toe pads. Gently contract your pelvic floor and sense or imagine, if you don't sense it, you imagine it. When you contract the pelvic floor, you just feel this kind of energy like an elevator moving up the spine and out through the crown of the head. And then you're going to sit forward off the blanket and the knees will bend. Move the blanket out of the way. And then bring your hands to the floor behind you. So the hands are not directly under the shoulders. They're slightly behind the shoulders. We're going to practice Purvottanasana, which is the inverted version of plank pose. It's also a back bend. So your fingertips point toward you. We're going to do it with bent knees as it's a little easier, and then maybe work into the full pose. So on an exhalation, you're going to push down into your hands and feet and lift your hips. Tailbone has to move in toward the ceiling, and then go ahead and have a seat. Okay, it's a hard pose. Shift your weight forward, drape your arms around your shins, and bow your head. So you're just putting your spine into a single curve from the brainstem to the tailbone. Just rest in that single curve for a couple breaths. Okay, we'll try it again like we just did with knees bent. So take your torso back at an angle, but stay over the sitting bones. Don't collapse onto your tailbone. Keep your lumbar curve flat or concave. Bring your hands to the floor, spread the fingers. Inhale here, exhale, lift your hips. Look up toward the ceiling. Tilt the pelvis back. Good, have a seat. Shift your weight forward, drape your arms around your legs and bow your head. So the full pose, option 1 is to repeat what you just did because you were right at your edge physically. Option 2, if you still need to modify, is to keep your forearms on the ground rather than your hands. That makes the pose a little bit more accessible, especially if you have wrist issues. Otherwise, you're going to come back to Dandasana. And your fingertips are just slightly back behind the hips. So again, when we press up, the shoulders move back. So we're attempting to prepare the pose by putting the hands back so that when we lift up, we have straight up and down arms. Okay, so you're either going to do knees bent, forearms down, or propped up on the fingertips. If you're doing the full pose, you're starting from Dandasana, big inhale. Everybody's taking a big inhale. Exhale, pressing down into the hands or forearms, lifting the hips. Try to lift the shoulder blades. You have to resist against gravity, which is the big component here. Roll the inner thighs down and then rest. Nice work. Sliding the heels toward the sitting bones. Again, draping your arms around the shins, bow the head. A few breaths. So we do get to repeat it once. And I want you to kind of bring your attention to the shoulders. There's a lot of work against gravity here. Gravity wants to force your sternum toward the floor. So there's a lot of work with the external rotation of the shoulders and the lifting up of the shoulder blades to keep the chest in the sunlight. So really kind of bring your focus there for your final attempt on Purvottanasana. So find your starting position, whether it's extended legs or bent knees. You're on the forearms or fingertips. Take a nice inhale, and on the exhale, pressing up into that pose. Rolling the shoulders into external rotation, moving the shoulder blades toward the chest. And go ahead and have a seat. Nice work. One more time, releasing into that nice forward bend, kind of like a seated child's pose. Recovering your smooth, silky breath. All right, so we're going to do a few prone positions. So lying down on our front body. If you like to have a little bit of a pad for the hip bones and the pelvis, make sure it's a thin layer that we're not kind of distorting the shape of the pose just to create that comfort. So just bringing something thin underneath the hip bones and the pelvis. Try not to have it so much above the hip bones. So have the excess blanket, if you're using one, running toward your feet rather than toward your abdomen. So we're going to start off with a repetition of cobra poses. So sometimes the body responds really well to repetition and re-entry rather than kind of holding poses for a long time. So we're going to do 8 cobra poses, and we're going to be coming into the cobra poses on the exhalations and out of the cobra poses on the inhalations. And if it feels too much for you to do every single breath, then you can modify and skip and just kind of be passive for a full cycle of breath. So listen to your body always. We're going to start with the hands next to the lowest floating ribs. And then you're going to squeeze your elbows in so that the shoulders broaden and the shoulder blades move in toward the chest. Make sure your legs are not only centered, but the feet are slightly wider than your hips and your small toes are sitting down as much as your big toes are. Take the tailbone into the floor, a nice inhale here. On your exhale, press up into cobra pose. Inhale to bring it down. Exhale again, or skipping and just waiting out a full cycle of breath. Inhale. So again, we're going to do 8 of these. Exhale up. Inhale down. Exhale. Inhale. So 4 more. You're doing great. Try not to squeeze the buttocks. Keep the outer hips rolling down, the inner thighs lifting up. 3 more. Last 2. Last 1. When you come down, make a little pillow out of your arms. Cross your arms, rest one of your cheeks, bend your knees, and float the legs back and forth. Clearing any tension away from the lower back, the sacrum, the lumbar spine. Letting your breath become smooth and easy again if it became a little bit ragged. So we're going to invert things and use the upper body now as the anchor, and we're going to be extending the legs one at a time, preparing for locust pose. So cross your right forearm under your forehead. And then fully relax your right leg. So let it be heavy, passive, connecting with the floor, sinking down into the floor. Prepare by taking your tailbone into the floor and lengthening out the lumbar spine. Take a nice in-breath, and on your exhale, lift your left leg up and exhale it down. Good. Exhale, lift it up, left leg again. Inhale, bring it down. So we're going to repeat this as well. And the idea here, we want to give more emphasis to lengthening the leg, like someone's pulling directly on your ankle, than on lifting. Kind of think about the lifting taking care of itself. So you're coming up on every exhale, unless you need to skip, and you're lengthening it back down on the in-breaths. Meanwhile, make sure you haven't shifted out of the pelvic tilt, that you're still taking the pelvis back. And make sure that your right leg is still passive. So you should essentially kind of be feeling like you've essentially grown the left leg. If you were to look at your feet, your left toes are sitting down a little bit farther on your mat than your right toes. Okay, the next time that your left leg comes down, you're going to leave it there. You're going to prop your forehead on your left forearm now. And we're going to do the other side. So just an 8 count, 8 elevations on the exhalations. Take an in-breath here. And on your exhale, lengthen the leg from the floor. Inhale it down. Lifting the inner thigh up and rolling the outer hip down. Imagine someone's grabbing that right ankle and gently pulling. 3 more. Last one. Now resting both legs. Go back to crossing your arms. Make a little pillow out of the arms. Rest your other cheek this time, if you remember which one. Bend the knees and sweep the legs back and forth. Okay, so now take your arms next to your thighs so that your palms face up. We're going to come into full locust pose. And the idea is on the exhale, and we're going to hold this one. We're not coming up and down with every breath. We're going to hold it for 5 breaths. We're going to be lifting the limbs from the floor, all four, also the head. And we're going to try to get the wrists as high as the shoulders. So look straight ahead. Palms are turned toward the ceiling. Pelvic tilt is already engaged, so take the tailbone into the body toward the floor. Nice big in-breath. On the exhale, lift everything up. And if you need to look at your wrist, see if it's as high as the shoulder. And here again, we have to resist gravity. We have to roll the shoulders toward the ceiling, even though gravity wants to roll them down toward the floor. So you have to really reach up with the flesh of the front shoulder, roll it back, shoot the breastbone forward, lift your inner thighs, make sure you're breathing, relax your buttocks. Extend out through your fingernails. Good, let everything come down. Cross your arms, rest your cheek, bend your knees, and sweep the legs back and forth. So we get to do it twice. We get to do it one more time. Think about you're like a marionette and someone has the strings attached to your inner thighs and they're going to keep pulling those inner thighs up. So don't let your inner thighs collapse. That's kind of going to be your focus on this next one. Take your arms back next to your thighs, palms up. Center your legs, tilt the pelvis, try to lengthen the lumbar curve. Take an in-breath, and on your exhale, lifting all four limbs, extending out through the fingertips, raising the wrists higher than they want to go. And then think about little strings attached to your inner thighs. Someone's lifting them. Next exhale, bring it down. Cross your arms. Rest your cheek, bend your legs, and sweep the legs back and forth. Okay, so we're going to take a little twist before we leave these prone positions. So from where you are now, take your right leg out sideways. Shift onto your left hip. We're coming in to Parvrita Padangusthasana from a back door. Okay, so we took the right leg out to the side. We're rolling onto our left hip. And then you're going to attempt to bring your right shoulder down. So now your chest should be face up and your head is face up. You can drape your right hand over your rib cage or side ribs, or you can extend it if you're ready for that. Roll your head so that you're looking either straight up or off to the right. You might use the left hand against your right thigh to kind of hold the leg in place. And we'll stay for 5 breaths. Keep breathing your right shoulder back toward the floor. And then you're going to start to bring yourself back onto your belly, roll back onto your belly, bring your legs back onto your mat. Center yourself once you're belly down again, and then swing the left leg out so it's perpendicular as best you can. Swing it out to left. Rolling onto your right hip side, onto the right shoulder, and then attempting to get the left shoulder also to sink down toward the floor. Again, you can use your right hand to hold the left leg where it is. You might unfold the left arm completely perpendicular from the trunk, or you might keep your hand resting on the side body. Your body will let you know what is preferred. And then maybe the head rolls off to the left for a complete twist. Maybe you keep a little more neutral neckline, looking straight up at the ceiling. But try to settle into those exhalations. Those exhales extend to their kind of their finishing point, their vanishing point. And then you're going to ease back gently to your front body. And then we're going to be bringing ourselves to our back bodies. And all that you're going to need is a strap. Turn my heater back on. It's getting nice and frigid in the house again. So all you're going to need is a strap. We're going to take a binding version of bridge and a binding version of reclining bound angle with the strap. And the strap, the good news is the strap will be in the very same place for both, so you won't have to make any adjustments. You're just going to take the strap over your front ankles. Now we know the alignment of bridge pose is not to have the feet completely together. So make sure you're not forcing the feet together with the strap over the front ankles. You want to keep your heels in the same width apart as your sitting bones. So you might have to bring a little more attention to that just because the strap might want to pull those feet together. So you'll come down onto your back like you would for bridge pose. And you're going to walk the heels in toward your sitting bones. Make sure you're still, and one thing you can do to keep your feet from coming together is you could put a block between them if you need a spacer to hold them apart so they don't slide together. I find it helpful to wrap my hands once with the strap so that I'm not gripping excessively and wasting my energy. And then try to create a palm up position. So you might have to kind of work your knuckles down to the floor, work the flesh of the outer upper arms down, but that's going to help you keep the shoulders really anchoring for you in this pose. Tilt the pelvis so you kind of close the gap between the lower back and the floor. Take an in breath, and on your exhale, lift your hips. Remember to step really firmly into your big toes, your inner heels, and drive those inner thighs down. Relax the buttocks. Remember the visual of of ripe tomatoes hanging from the vine. Relax the buttocks. Don't let the knees widen. And now on an exhale, lengthen the spine one vertebra at a time back to the floor, like you're laying out your very favorite necklace bead by bead. Lengthen, 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 all the way back to the sacrum. Let the sacrum drop into the floor really nice and heavy. It should help you restore a curve to the lumbar spine. And now we are going to let the feet join. So bring your feet together. Your feet are as close as you can bring them to the buttocks. And still making sure you have a palm up position. You're going to let the knees separate. So you're in bound angle. And I kind of find this nice because my hands create some natural support for my hips. Because my hands are right there under my hips. But if you need more support, you'll want to use it so that you can really surrender. Feeling that descent of your knees and thigh bones. So beware that there can be a tendency here to shorten the lumbar spine. So keep taking the tailbone toward the ceiling, elongating the flesh of the buttocks from upper buttock to lower buttock. Keep the shoulders as broadly anchored to the floor as you can. The rotation of the arms, the palm up position should help with that. We're going to stay a full minute. Thinking about the flesh of your shoulders and just imagining all the little skin cells moving from the front shoulders toward the back shoulders. Peeling those shoulders open. We really have to work against that default setting of rounded shoulders because it's a protective stance that we know. We're just kind of opening up here, knowing you're supported and safe, and breathing. Just kind of ease the strap out of your hands and until the hands are free and the arms kind of resemble your Shavasana arms. And just stay a few more moments. And then gently use your fingertips to join the knees, widen the stance between your feet. And then shift to your side. So we're going to circle back to Paryankasana, but this time we're going to attempt to do it from the hero legs. This will kind of be our last very active pose. If you know that's you're going to need modified legs, you can do this pose with the swastikasana, the cross-legged position, or the bound angle. But if you're able to, you're going to be doing it from hero pose. So you'll set up your hero pose, the seated version, with the sitting bone support and the padding for the shins. But the reclining supports for your torso are different. They're the same supports you used at the start of the class, except if you're taking hero pose, you're going to need your blocks to be a level higher because your legs are higher from the floor. So you'll probably take the highest setting for the block that goes right behind the chest. And you might also take a similar height for the head, but you'll have to see about that. Sometimes people need to add a blanket over the head block to make it even higher. So you just have to make sure you have your chin and forehead level, that you're not dunking your head or collapsing your cervical spine. Take some time again with your legs. Make sure your knees are in alignment. You might sandwich that blanket between your calf muscles and your thighs. And again, I like to use my thumbs as a guide to kind of hold the block in place. And I'm attempting to land that first block right behind the sternum, like it's a pillar holding up my sternum. And then my head finds its way down. Remember, we want to keep our knees together and grounded, not apart and flying up. So I personally prefer Paryankasana to reclining hero because I have a very hypermobile lumbar spine. So it kind of helps me play into that. But that might be the opposite for you. This pose might be more difficult for you than the reclining hero pose, where we have more of a flat back body. So again, you want to start the same way with your hands anchored toward your feet. This will help get the shoulders surrendered and the chest really nice and flying high. But then you might move into the extended arms overhead, helping extend the torsos, helping open the armpits. Remember to soften the face and point your gaze toward your cheeks.
Soften your temples. Think about having a little zipper between your front ribs, right down the middle. And just kind of squeeze the midline toward itself. So moving the outer ribs towards the inner ribs. And this can bring a lot of support to your back body. If you did take the arms up, you're going to start to bring your hands back toward your feet. And again, we want to come up leading with the chest, corseting the abdominals until you're all the way back up. We'll do one more downward facing dog just to release your legs. Moving things aside. If the blanket won't be in your way, you can leave it there. Take your legs up. And again, imagine you're wearing really high heels. So don't worry about forcing the heels down, but do your best to straighten your legs, to move your leg bones back, tilt the pelvis forward. And then once your legs are relieved, take yourself into child's pose. Use your hands as a pedestal for the forehead. So stacking your fists and moving the point of contact close to the hairline so your chin tucks into your chest. And before we come into Shavasana, just take a seat on your mat. We'll do some gentle twisting. From seated, just raising the arms. On an exhale, turning to the left. Be gentle and soft. You might close your eyes. Just a few more breaths, turning to the left. Maybe now turning the head as well if you haven't done so already. Looking over that left shoulder. You're going to inhale, take the arms up, come back to center, exhale, hands to your heart. Just rest there for a few moments, dropping your shoulders, eyes are closed. Breathing the sternum toward the thumbs and up toward the ceiling as well. Finding equal length to the torso, front and back. On an in-breath, raising the arms and exhaling to the right. Stay about 10 breaths. in breath, you'll take the arms back to center. And again, exhale, hands to your heart just for a couple more moments, releasing the shoulders. Your head like the point of an arrow. Shoulders like the soft feathers moving toward the floor. As you're ready, you're going to gently move into your Shavasana. And make sure you need to address anything that wants to come through physically, anything that needs to move or shift, so that you can really be still in your final resting pose. Give yourself as much support as you need. Lying down, lengthening the arms away from the torso. Feet placed slightly wider than the hips. Swallowing to relax your throat and jaw. Allow your cheeks to drop into the hollow. Your belly drop into the pelvis. The body feels soft and diffuse. Allowing yourself the important task of doing nothing. Let the breath be smooth and silky. Let the responsibilities of life roll off your back. Feel the lateral movement of the lungs, feathering of the ribs. Turning your gaze down, turning the energy of thought inward. As the energy of the body opens and expands. Receive whatever feelings arise from your heart. Bring attention to your heart and embrace oceanic feelings of peace. Be at complete surrender to the moment. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. If you'd like to leave with me, you can start to take some deeper breaths. Inviting very small movement back into the body. Beginning to move your hands in onto your chest or belly. Bending your knees, letting the feet slide onto the floor. Easing to one side of your body. From the side body, moving to seated as gently as you can. Once you're seated, joining the hands together in front of the heart. Relaxing the cheeks into an easy smile. Let's take a deep breath in through the nose. And let it go. The place within me that I know to be divine, I honor that place within each of you. Namaste. Right. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to seeing you Friday. This Friday is our last Friday Zoom class. Otherwise, I will see you Monday. Take care.